WOCA.
Ocala.
All right, 25 minutes before 11 o'clock. Thank you for tuning in this Friday morning. There's a big event happening tomorrow, and I want you to know about it. It's happening right across the street from where we're broadcasting over at the Weber Center at the College of Central Florida. And in the studio to give us the details about the event I'm referring to, Tim Potter and Tom McElroy are here. Tom is a Christian Science practitioner and inspirational speaker on the healing power of prayer, which I definitely believe in and have seen it work in my own life and my family's life. Served as a volunteer chaplain working with inmates in men's, women's, and youth facilities. Wow. And Tim Potter, you are with the church, right?
Yes.
Okay. Well, good to see you again, Tim. And Tom, nice to meet you.
Great to meet you too.
Now, your event tomorrow is called Purpose, Letting Your Brilliance Shine Through. And then the subtitle says, Exploring Fresh Ideas on Finding the Good in Life You Are Looking For and Experience Consistent and Reliable Satisfaction and Fulfillment. That's a long title.
That's not necessarily part of the title, but yeah, that's what it's going to be about.
Well, nice to meet you. Thank you for coming in. And are you touring with this, with the presentation?
No, I'm kind of on the road perpetually, and I just go where people ask me to go. So different community groups or churches ask me to come, and so the tour, I've been doing this for about 7 years now, and so I'll be in California after this, and then back in Florida.
Wow.
It's always different.
Wow. So, and how do they find out about you?
I'm part of a board of speakers, and so people who are looking to do this kind of outreach, provide a public talk on topics of spirituality and how spiritual ideas impact our daily life. They'll go to this board of speakers and they'll look for people and topics that they feel are pertinent to their communities.
And you visited our men's correctional facility.
That's right. I was there last night. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I did a presentation similar to. At least in format to what we're going to do tomorrow, working with a musician named Alex Cook. So a lot of times when I give a talk, it's just me. It's maybe 45 minutes, and then, it's somewhat interactive, and then Q&A time. But this is great because there's music infused all throughout it, too, and it's kind of a fun format to explore.
Wow. What is the hard part? Let me try to tell you from our perspective. We will have disagreements a lot of times with our guests, mm-hmm. and let's take it from the person who doesn't even believe in intelligent design, let alone God, let alone Jesus.
Yeah.
Okay, so we will debate that person, and that person wants us to believe what he or she believes.
Yeah.
Typically, we're trying to battle each other to convince each other that you've got it wrong. Mm-hmm. We've got it right. You've got it wrong, and they're trying to do the same thing in reverse. We're convinced. Mm-hmm. I can't say that I know anything about God, but I'm convinced that there is a God. I believe in the power of prayer, as I implied in the introduction. So when you have somebody in a prison, or somebody who's about to lose somebody to cancer, or somebody who's on the threshold of something really life-altering, how do you reach that person to convince that person that there's still hope? How do you do that?
Yeah. Well, the guys in prison, I'll just focus on that for 1 second. You heard I had a background as a chaplain, so I've got a lot of love for that. A lot of times these are guys who, in some ways, not just guys, but men, women, and youth, who are more locked up on the outside than on the inside. They were caught in sort of a circle of friends, things, habits going on, and to be pulled out of that and brought away from it sometimes, or even many times, is actually an opportunity for them to start thinking for themselves and reflecting, asking big questions, and to see how thinking different can make some change going forward. So, you hear there's no atheists in the trenches, and it's like that in a lot of ways in prison too, because people have the time and sort of mental space in some ways to explore. So I love meeting people there. That's a little bit of a different category for me than someone maybe who's facing something that feels really tragic, because prison, surprisingly for a lot of people, doesn't necessarily have to be tragic. It can be it can provide a gateway for people to learn and grow.
Well, even in the state of Florida, the philosophy with the juvenile system is to rehabilitate.
Yeah.
Once you're over 18, then the philosophy is to punish, to be punitive.
Yeah.
So that is the philosophy, to put them away for a while so that they can have time to think. Sometimes I think that we are such a fast-paced society now that maybe a lot of our tendencies to be at least agnostic might be because we're just not taking the time to stop.
Yeah, I think that's a really astute observation.
We used to walk, and there's a lot of time to think when you walk.
yeah.
Right?
Yeah, well, now you're texting and walking. They say there's more accidents every year than in texting and driving. People texting and walking.
I didn't know that. I didn't know that.
Yeah, surfing the web while you're walking. Yeah, there's not the mental space to consider the big things, and it's there. The answers are there. The presence and activity of something bigger than ourselves is there, but if you're not looking at it, I use this analogy sometimes in some of the talks I give. If you have a little mirror and you focus it towards the sun and you're outside, you'll get a big bright beam reflected off that mirror.
Nice.
If you take it and focus it towards the ground, well, the sun's still there. It's just as bright and warm and capable of making things grow and energetic,
wonderful.
but you don't reflect the light. And it's the same with our thinking. Where we put our focus has a lot to do with whether we see that light reflected in our lives.
Did you choose this religion with all the different religions out there? Did you choose this? Were you brought up in this religion, or is this something that just jumped out at you and you found this was your calling?
Yeah, my parents studied Christian Science, so it's an approach to Christianity that was always a big part of my life. Growing up wasn't always easy. There was a lot of problems in the family. We were really poor, and it was what my parents taught me about God that I think helped me more than any other thing, even more than what they could do for me themselves. That being said, I studied philosophy at university, and explored a lot of things. I just always loved people and ideas. Truth is what was most important to me, not dogma, tradition. So, I did end up finding that this was what was my path, but I think it was with the willingness to explore a lot of other things along the way too.
I sometimes think about Jesus, and I think he had this ability to look over this wall and see what it's like on the other side, and nobody else did. Nobody else did, and he's very excited about it because he's the Son of God. So he's coming to this side of the wall. He's saying, "Look! You can do this. You can do that. You can believe. You can pray. I mean, there is a God. There is something on the other side of that wall. You're not going to believe how wonderful it is.
Yeah.
How hard is it to convince people of that, though?
Yeah.
And I want to use your work with prisoners just for a second, because tomorrow you're going to have people who are not physically prisoners,
right,
but maybe they've got some kind of imprisonment happening for them, right?
Sure.
Maybe they don't even look at it that way.
Yeah, well, I think that's one of we'll actually start the talk probably talking about how when we consider this question of purpose, which is really what the talk's about, how when we're a kid, somebody asks you, what do you want to be when you grow up?
Right.
And actually, I have a story about a little kid. I didn't even ask him. He just says to me out of the blue, he's 3 years old. He's the son of a friend of mine. We're playing trucks, and and he says to me, I want to be everything when I grow up. And he pauses for a minute, and then he says, and a painter. And I don't know how he separated the two, but what I loved
that's funny.
is that he had a sky is the limit kind of feeling, and yet we start to feel, I think, as we go along, well, the things I can do, the good in my life, it's going to be defined by my education, my family, my background, all these kind of exterior things. We lose that sky is the limit feeling, and it does become a box or a type of prison. And I think that the message of purpose that the Bible gives us blows that out of the water. It gives us, it attaches us to a bigger sense of the infinite again, and shows that what we're made for grows out of that, and not out of all this other exterior stuff.
Absolutely. I love that you said that. Jay Leno is no longer with The Tonight Show. I'm going to use him as an example since we all know who he is. And a lot of times when people are no longer at the job that they've had, they retired, they suddenly don't feel that purpose anymore. In his case, I think he's going to be in Jacksonville this weekend. So he's continuing to do whatever his purpose is, which is, I guess, to entertain people. What did you want to be? If I knew you when you were 6, what would you tell me you wanted to be when you grew up?
I might have said an architect.
An architect?
Yeah. I think I don't even know if I fully knew what that meant, but I liked creativity.
Okay. Creativity, and you thought that building buildings would be the way you are creative.
I think, it was the idea of designing something that was practical for people, taking creativity and helping people.
Okay, so using that kind of as a jumping point for this next question, if you're trying to convince people that Jesus saw something on the other side of the wall, that there really is a God, and whatever other metaphor you want to throw in there, you have to have creative ways of reaching Robin, a different creative way to reach me, a different creative way to reach that lady that's walking into the mall.
Yeah.
So is your mind constantly going through files and files and files of things? Oh, this is what will work with this person.
Well, Jesus' great commandment was love God with all your heart and soul and love your neighbor as yourself. And I think that it's really love. And you can look at it as all the ways, there's a million languages, so to speak, right? Now I'm just talking French and Spanish, but like you said, all the different ways you'd speak to a little kid or
Right.
someone with different backgrounds and cultures. And you can try and attack it like that. But I think, honestly, if to the person who's humble enough to listen, to pay attention to where people are at, humble enough to make mistakes and to grow, but motivated by that concept of just loving, I think that's what gets you to speak different languages more than any other thing, and to speak it effectively. Because if you see you're not connecting with someone, if you see you're trying to see over that wall or help someone see a little bit over it too, and it's not working, you'll adapt, you'll stop, you'll look for something, because your desire really is just, out of love to help somebody, not just believe in something, that is sort of a positive thought for the moment, but to give them something that will be practical in their lives, some kind of inspiration, some kind of insight that actually makes a difference in the way that they feel going forward, a bigger sense of who they are, a bigger sense of what their life is about. And so I think with love, you look at the way Paul spoke to people. He spoke to so many different audiences. Tim and I were just talking about this. And he adapted his speech. Jesus did too when he spoke in parables, and he could explain the biggest, most, the deepest concepts of the universe that can sometimes seem very abstract, but in ways that were so tangible.
And that is one of the things that you're integrating into your talk, the healing power of prayer, because people need prayer for everything in their life. And then when there's an illness, they need prayer, but they also have to pray for the doctors and the people that are there performing the surgeries or giving them the medication so that God can guide their hands to heal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, there's no separation. I mean, I think that's, we compartmentalize our lives a lot. Mm-hmm. And you can't compartmentalize God by nature. Regardless of somebody's denomination, most people have a sense, if they have any concept of something like a God or a creator, that this God is universal, that it's not a God of some people and not other people.
There you go. Right. Right.
And so, you can't say that God stops at the doors of this church or this mosque or of the mall any more than you just can't pray for yourself and not for others. It doesn't work like that. If you get cut off on the freeway in a dangerous moment and you pray and you find your peace, you feel that sense of being loved and protected. You can't at the same time really practically get that kind of depth of peace and love, and at the same time say, well, the jerk who just cut me off, isn't loved.
Right.
That love, it's got to be big enough to include that guy too, in order for it truly to mean anything to you as well. So it's wherever you are, whoever you are, in whatever way you're looking for healing, we're all in this together, and it's the same God that's guiding us, and we're just all doing our best to get that.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever worked with somebody that did not feel they had a purpose, and you were able to persuade them to believe they did?
Yeah, well, I think maybe people don't think specifically of purpose, but if you're not asking questions, I think what happens is we tend to just sort of play out roles, and they're the ones that are given to us. I had a story that I shared with the guys last night about a young guy in a probation camp that I worked with, and he grew up in a gang family. His dad was in the gang, grandpa, uncles, brothers. He tried not to be when he was first growing up, but he got jumped by the other gang members anyway just because of his affiliation with his family. His teachers were no help. They treated him, the same way, because they had expectations because they knew his family.
Right,
and
right.
So that was a role that was given to him, and so I think he sort of felt, he never asked himself what his purpose was. He just felt like he never had a choice. This is what his life was going to be like. And so, we started talking about the fact that, the Bible talks about the fact that we're the children of God, that we're made in the very likeness of God. And to me, that means we have a sort of built-in spiritual DNA, something that's not defined by all that exterior stuff, by our family or even what we've done, but by God, and if God is love and truth, then the love of love is built into us. The truth of truth itself is built into who we are. Those are fixed facts about us, and it can't change. We talked about how knowing more about that not only gives you a bigger sense of who you are, but also leads to a bigger sense of purpose and what you can do in life. Well, this guy, some of these kids, they were never told they were good before. They're just told they're trash.
It's an important thing, isn't it, to tell somebody they're worthy, that they're appreciated. I worked with the juvenile system for 7 years. I worked with them for 7 years, and I worked with boys. And once in a while, I would think, in my amateur psychiatrist mind, whatever I have, that what would serve this boy the best is to have a girlfriend. Absolutely, and it's kind of a strange thing. And I would say, you know what, you gotta find a girl, and I would try to hook him up. I try to be, well, I mean, once in a while. I mean, sometimes a job is the thing, and sometimes something else is the thing. But once in a while, having another person who's going to say, "Gosh, I really appreciate you." That could be all the difference in the world. My goodness, isn't that why we celebrate marriage, I think?
Yeah. Well, the bottom line, I think, is the qualities, and we have always opinions about how that's going to come together. But part of what we'll talk about in the lecture tomorrow, and the talk tomorrow, is about the fact we say we want love, so I want that relationship, or I want that guy, I want that girl. I want safety and security, so I need money. I want fun, so I need to travel. I want beauty, so I need art. And so we have expectations about where these qualities are going to manifest in our lives. And that can ultimately create a box too, because it's not, we start to think this is the only way I'm going to get it. And when we start realizing, no, these qualities, they're bigger than that. They come from God. They come from a source which can take so many different shapes and forms in our lives. And when we're open to that, when we look first and foremost to this bigger source of good, we also find that there's a cause and effect relationship there. We're breaking down these kind of old expectations, and we find that that good, those qualities can express themselves in a lot of unique and original ways. And that's what happened with this young guy, that I was working with. He started asking me, you saying good is built into me? You're saying that wisdom, intelligence is built into who I am. Is that true?
Hard to believe it, right?
Yeah, and I just said, it's not my opinion. It's there. It's built in. It's not defined by this exterior stuff.
Yeah.
And he'd just light up every time, and he kept asking more. I actually had a list of all these good words, these adjectives, and he'd ask me about every one. What does that mean? Are you saying that's built in? And I felt like he was really discovering for the first time a bigger sense of who he was. And I'll tell you, that guy was back in my class the next week. He had been the troublemaker in that class. And then he was kind, he was respectful, he would help, he was helpful to the other guys. I worked with him another 8 months. He never went back to the misbehaving stuff he had done with me before. And I feel like it's because he made a real discovery about what was already there. So you asked, have you seen people find a bigger sense of their purpose? And I think, it's about information. Wow. We don't always have the right information, but when we get it, it's not just about positive thinking. It's about discovering what's already there.
He made a discovery about what was already there. I mean, if this was a printed interview, we would take that quote and put it in bold right off to the side. And this is a very important point that hopefully everybody you touch is getting, including those listening right now. So tomorrow you're giving a presentation across the street at the college, at the Weber Center.
Right.
And what time is it again?
2 p.m.
And what is Alex Cook's role? He's the musician. What does he play?
Musician. Yeah, he plays guitar. And he does Christian music, and he tours around. Yeah, he'll be singing and playing, and his songs are all gonna, the themes of the songs will fit in right in with the themes of what we're talking about in the lecture.
And this First Church of Christ Scientists, that's the church, right? We always have to ask about the word scientist. So how do you answer that question? Why is the word scientist in there?
Right. Well, I think it's something that gives context to the teaching. I mean, people have an idea what Christianity means. It's about the life, the works, the example, the love of Christ, of Jesus. And science, to me, there's a lot of sciences, biology and chemistry and whatever. But if you boil it down to its common characteristics, it means that something's based on law. It's repeatable, it's consistent, it's universal, it applies to all people equally. It's not something you earn or work your way up to. It's timeless. 2 and 2 equals 4 is a mathematically scientific fact. Well, that's the same for you and me as it is for a little kid in the village in Afghanistan. It was the same 2,000 years ago as it is today. Right. So that is to say, if there's a science behind what Jesus taught, how he lived, and what his disciples understood and proved in their lives, then it wasn't just for that time. It's not just for one group. It puts into context these teachings in a way that just reminds us this is for everybody under all circumstances. And it's not something we work our way up to or earn, but that if we can understand it for ourselves, we can prove its meaning and its power in our lives as well.
I like how you have the crosses in the T's under, within the letting your brilliance shine through, because that's very subliminal that you made the T's into crosses.
I didn't even notice that. I'm just
I'm not the one who designed it, but yeah, it's great.
Saturday, tomorrow at 2 p.m. at the College of Central Florida in the Weber Center, Tom McElroy has the actor's good looks.
Yes, very much so.
That's very kind of you.
Very much so.
So when we had an interview maybe 6 months ago or so with somebody from National Geographic. Mm-hmm. The show, the TV show that he was on the air to promote was about the butterfly and how it becomes how a caterpillar becomes a butterfly. Mm-hmm. And he said something pretty fascinating, that the DNA of a caterpillar is different than the DNA of the butterfly it becomes. Mm-hmm. No other creature, and this is him, we learned this from him, no other creature does this. It's the only creature that changes its DNA. And I thought, hasn't the butterfly always been almost a metaphor for
Change.
Afterlife and change? Yes. And so when you can change somebody's mind about whether they are worthy or not, I mean, maybe science can't show that the DNA changed, but certainly something psychologically has changed within the heart of that person.
Yeah, and I think there is a connection, a big one, between our thinking, our focus, our consciousness, and our bodies, and I think, in fact, it's sometimes we look at the body like it's separate. We want to compartmentalize that. We want to say it's got its own rules, its own sort of laws or science behind it, and then there's everything else that's psychological, emotional, spiritual. And I think we're doing a better job these days of seeing that we can't really compartmentalize like that. That where we're at spiritually, emotionally, psychologically has a huge impact, on our bodies, on our health, on our well-being. More and more people are exploring that. And, we've seen the phenomena for a long time, placebo effect and all kinds of things along those lines. But I think we're, as a society, in some ways, maybe not across the board, but a lot of folks are having the humility to say, okay, whatever we want to call God, that's one thing, but we can't ignore this anymore. We can't just compartmentalize our lives like that. There's, from my point of view, a single source of good, and that good breathes through our lives in every way, including our health and well-being.
Right.
And one of the things that makes you credible for your touring around the world and speaking to people is all of the insight that you've had on a personal level because of your history. Because sometimes people will hear somebody speak and then they'll say, well, they've never walked in my shoes, they just don't understand, but you do.
Yeah, well, I do my best just to share from the experiences that I've had. It doesn't, like you said, do any good to just talk about a philosophy that, so I also, I don't talk about things that I haven't seen at least some proof for, and it's not, that I've got it all worked out. But if I can say, look, I've seen this, I've worked with somebody, and I've watched healing happen, and I've experienced it in my own life. It's from that basis then I can say, well, let's explore together what that might mean, for all of us. Again, if there's a science behind it, you can't say if that happened in one person's life, it couldn't happen in mine. Because anymore you could say, well, if 2 and 2 equaled 4 when you were at the supermarket putting some oranges in your basket, I don't know what's going to happen to me next time I go. There's a principle behind it, and I think that's what this is about. It's not my story. It's about, and neither is the Bible just about stories of people who lived, years and years ago. It's about principles that apply to every single one of us.
We had in the studio an author who wanted to be an author. When he was 6, if you asked him what he wanted to be, he would have said an author.
Wow, cool.
But everybody directed him, that's not going to make you money. So everybody in his life directed him. He was sitting right in the seat you're sitting in right now. Everybody in his life directed him toward, what did he become, a lawyer or a dentist?
Yeah, a dentist.
Can't remember. Yeah.
He became a dentist.
Dentist. Was it both? Was he a lawyer and a dentist?
Yeah, he was a dentist first, and then he became a lawyer.
Yeah, so everybody directed him to do the thing that would make money. Now he's finally doing the thing he would have told you he wanted to be when he was 6 years old. Right now, when you're across the street at the college, you're going to have some young people who right now are studying to do something and they really would rather do something else.
Yeah.
And as a young person, when I was that age, I was with them 100%. But now, knocking on 60, I would say to a young person, do the job that makes a little bit of money. It's kind of hard to direct somebody what's right when following your heart used to be your mantra, I don't know, how do you handle that? It's a different message, I'm guessing.
Yeah, well, I think the nature of limited thinking, let's just call it that for the moment, is not always just to give us one limitation, but to give us two options. So we'll ping pong back and forth between the two, right? It's like, well, you can either make money and be unhappy, or you can do the thing that's in your heart, follow your heart,
Right.
and who knows what you have
And
no
eat
security.
ramen noodles the rest of your life. Yeah.
And I think there's a third option. I think the third option is not so much about following my heart as much as it is about following the heart of God. And I believe that if you're doing that, then inherent in that is not, God doesn't give a solution that says, joy but not protection and support and sustenance in your life, or the other way around. The goodness of God is clever enough, intelligent enough to put us right where we need to be each step of the way. I studied philosophy in school. And within 7 or 8 months out of school, I was running a finance bank. I was just a glorified mortgage broker, but it was absolutely not what I had planned on doing. What I was
miserable?
interested in. No. At times, it was a huge struggle because it was right in the middle of that environment. The years leading up to the big crash, a lot of dishonesty and things going on. I'm going to talk about that story actually in the talk tomorrow.
Wow.
But I learned a ton. I gave back a ton. Helped a lot of people. And then 5 or 6 years later, I was doing more ministry work, which is actually what I'd kind of want to do when I first got out of school.
Mm-hmm.
But what I found was when I'm putting aside just my desire, as well as the opinions of others and what makes for a good living, and following this deeper direction, I don't have to pick and choose between those two. I don't have to buy into the idea that those are the only two options in life.
That's why you're doing the presentation tomorrow. That answer right there illustrated it. Tom McElroy is who you're listening to. I hope I'm saying your name right.
You got it.
Am I
Great.
saying
Yeah,
right?
thank you.
Tomorrow, across the street at the Weber Center at the College of Central Florida, 2 p.m. Is there a price for this? Do we have to pay to get in?
No, free admission.
Free admission. All right. That can't get any better than that. The First Church of Christ Scientist is your of Ocala. Do we say your sponsor? What do we say?
Yes.
And responsible for bringing Tom into the studio and into Ocala. When do you head to LA tomorrow? Sunday?
I head back to Boston.
Boston.
So first I'm driving down to Palm Beach, and then I fly back to see my wife for an evening before I go to LA to speak at a university.
Nice.
What does your wife do?
My wife works with media relations and actually talks a lot about some of the same things we're talking about today, about the intersect between health and spirituality.
All right. Nice to meet you, Tom. And Tim, nice to see you again.
Nice to see you.
And do you want to give out any phone numbers, any websites that our listeners can use?
Phone numbers for...
Transportation or further information is right there.
Okay, all right.
Oh, okay.
Oh, wow, you even drive people there?
Yes, if
Wow.
that's necessary.
Wow.
Oh,
we'll do
wonderful.
Whatever it takes.
So if you want to go to the event, listen up. Here's the number.
So on the flyer here, it says for information, call 916-541-1693 or 352-237-8683.
All right. Thank you both. Tim, thank you again, as always.
Nice to
And
see
Tom,
you.
thank you for what you're doing.
No, it's been a joy.
Not just for coming in here, but you're making the world a better place.
Thank you very much.
And you need to know that you're appreciated, too.
I really appreciate
Your
that.
purpose shines. We will take a little break, and we will be right back, because we've got to do our purpose, which is to sell advertising
Yes,
or
we
something.
do.
I'm not sure what we do here. We'll be right back.
You're listening to WOCA News Talk 1370, Ocala's source for what's happening in today's hottest, up-to-date news and topics.
You've got a garden and we've got a show for you called You've Got a Garden with your host, Master Gardener Carol Ann Baldwin. Carol Ann answers your questions about your flowers, your veggies, your grass, your trees, even questions about your bugs. And she's only on WOCA, so don't miss Carol Ann Baldwin and You've Got a Garden each Tuesday from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. right here on WOCA The Source.
Legally Yours, brought to you by Fuller & Fuller Attorneys at Law. On the air every Wednesday morning at 10:30 a.m. with John Fuller, a board-certified civil trial lawyer for over 25 years. John welcomes your questions, from business to complex family matters to legal disputes. So tune in every Wednesday morning at 10:30 a.m. for Legally Yours with John Fuller, right here on